The battle of wizards and warriors continues with iron swords. The evil wizard Malkill will take the shape of the earth, wind, water, and fire. Farewell! The fate of the world is in your hands!
You're listening to the Piercing Wizard podcast, and I'm your host, Ryan Willett. I'm a professional body piercer with 20 years experience. I travel around the world teaching technique and safety classes, and I'm a member of the Association of Professional Piercers. Listen in as I talk to my friends and colleagues about our industry so we can all stay sharp. Hi everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Piercing Wizard podcast. We've got a little bit of a mishmash episode for you today. We've had a couple different conversations since coming home from the APP conference. We already did our wrap-up, so we're not going to get too far into it. But there was something that I kind of felt like a dope for not like fully thinking through or even really understanding that you articulated for me pretty well. I'm in a reprocessing studio, so the tools that I have are meant to be reprocessed, reused, re-sterilized, and I have some tools that I've been using for close to 20 years. I'm following a lot of similar standards to reprocessing tools for the dental industry, for medical and surgical use. I'm caring for my tools the way a lot of those facilities would care for them, the equipment, the processes, things like that. But now that we're kind of in a point as the body piercing industry where a lot of piercers are using disposable tools and thinking of disposable piercing studios, the way that you might phrase that in the dental or medical world would be single-use implements. And you articulated pretty well that if a tool, if an item is designed for single use, that reprocessing that item, even though it might look very similar to other items that you are reprocessing, single-use items are not designed or meant to be reprocessed. So why don't you talk about that a little bit, because the way that you articulated it really kind of changed the way that I'm looking at some of the different products that are available on the market today.
So this was something that came up when we taught safe practices together at APP this year, which is kind of like a essential fundamentals class, if you like, information that we consider really important when it comes to just daily studio operations at any level. And it's a good example of how the content of that changes pretty much year to year almost as things that come on the market change. And something that we've both noticed in the last kind of year or so is that more disposable medical tools are on the market and being used. And I work in a mostly tool-free studio, but where I have to use a tool, more than half of the time I prefer to use a metal tool. And I'm now set up for metal tool recycling, and I'm quite pleased with the direction that it's going in. But as metal disposable tools start to become more prevalent, a lot of people don't seem to know that you can't reuse metal single-use items, or are not supposed to reuse metal single-use items if they're being sold as single-use items, which you pointed out often have a particular logo or image printed on them, typically of a kind of a number 2 with a line going through it. That means it's for one use only. And the reason for that is you might look at a pair of metal hemostats, for example, and you buy a set of metal hemostats and maybe they cost $10. And then you have another set of metal hemostats that cost $1.50. And you're thinking they're just metal hemostats. Surely I can just process them and run them the same way. But those products have come to market very differently. A tool that's designed for reuse, the manufacturer will provide instructions on how that product should be reprocessed, re-sterilized between uses. And the manufacturer are also saying, we have tested this product and it should be as stable and as functional on use 1,000 as it should be on use 1 with the proper care. Or whatever the limits on their recommended product usage is. Whereas for a disposable metal tool, they haven't done any of that. It's not been tested to that standard. It's not been built to that standard. It's just been designed for use this once and toss it. And what that means is if you are reprocessing those single-use tools, you are taking on 100% of the liability should there be an issue with that tool or a failure with that tool, not the manufacturer, because they've fulfilled their agreement to you, and you've now taken the product and you're using it in a kind of off-label way.
Well, I think like a big disconnect that sometimes piercers might not think about it is, you were using the term manufacturer. The facility where the item is initially created is the manufacturer, but a lot of times we're buying something from a reseller, from a wholesaler, a factory that's making medical tools. Very rarely are they making tools specifically for body piercing use. They're typically making them for surgical use, all these different things that we're adapting for use for body piercing. So they might be making 10,000 at a time, and then 500 go to this vendor, 500 go to this vendor. So sometimes I hope that the vendors are still passing on that information. This is designed to be reprocessed. This is designed to be single use only. When you talk about the labeling, that's something that I bring up in the safe practices class, different things about like the more obvious labeling, expiration dates, things like that. But a lot of the packages that we're getting our materials in, they'll also have other symbols on them. It's really helpful to understand what those symbols are. So if you're looking at a box of, let's say, sterile gloves, and there are all these different symbols on the side, and one's an hourglass, and one's an umbrella, and one's a sun, and all those all mean different things. It means it's not meant to be exposed to moisture, or it's not meant to be exposed to bright light or to heat, or it expires within a certain date range. And one of the symbols you might see on some products would be a number 2 with a circle and a line through it. And that means it's not meant to be used 2 times or more. It's not meant to be reused. It's not meant to be reprocessed. It can still be stainless steel to the point where it's not going to rust or degrade in the initial packaging that you receive it in. It can withstand being sterilized that first time, but it might not be made of a same material of metal. It might not be polished to the same level as other tools that are designed to withstand frequent reprocessing. So like I said, I have certain tools in my shop that I've been using for 20 years, and there should be no visible degradation. It shouldn't be rusty. It shouldn't look like a really old screwdriver that you have in a toolbox somewhere, something that's been sitting around and getting a lot of use and getting beat up. It should look pretty close to brand new, even after repeated reprocessing and use. Single-use items are not really made with the same material, the same polish, things like that, so safe to use once. But you could be degrading that tool by exposing it to the chemicals and the processes that we might use in a studio to reprocess, to re-sterilize, to reuse an item. So just keep those things in mind. It's great that there are so many single-use and disposable items out there. A lot of them are plastic, but a lot of them are also metal. And just keep in mind that just because it's a metal tool, it doesn't mean that it's the exact same thing as all the other metal tools that you might have been exposed to in your experience as a body piercer. So just understand the difference. Something that's meant to be reused, reprocessed, something that's meant to be single use, disposed of, or recycled after use. Just know the difference and know how to properly use that item.
And if it's something that you're interested in, there are studies into this that you can go on and read. It's not a big shock that research has been done into this area, because being in the UK in particular, if the NHS can find a way to save money and do something for less money, if there was a way that they could reuse these tools, it is something that's been researched and looked into to say, like, well, could we be reusing some of this stuff? And if there was a way they could do it safely, I'm sure they would. But if they're saying there isn't, I think we should default that that's the correct position.
Yeah, so there will be some items in the studio, hemostats and different pin tapers and things like that. And before you go to the effort of reprocessing them and reintroducing them back into your workflow, just understand if that item can be reprocessed safely, or if it is just meant to be used once and then properly disposed of.
So this week we have a couple of Patreon dates coming up.
Yeah, so as this publishes, if all goes well with editing, this episode should publish on July 21st, 2025. So that means this week I should also be publishing my latest Patreon video. It's going to be about frenum piercings. And I'm specifically talking about the penile genital piercing. So in the video I talk about the terminology, frenum, frenulum, what does that mean, how it can be a little bit of an ambiguous term when you're using it to talk about a body piercing, because there are multiple frenulums on the body. So I'm specifically talking about the penile genital frenulum. I've got a lot of information there. I've got a really good video example for you, a couple different photo examples too. I'll be talking about marking and placement and performance. Particularly on clients who have been circumcised, that will be the bulk of my experience as an American body piercer. You kind of have the opposite side of that coin, primarily experienced with intact anatomy for genital piercings, frenum piercings included. Are frenum piercings something that you do often? That seems like it would be a little bit challenging to kind of incorporate under foreskin.
No, not really. I would say that they are very common.
Yeah.
They're one of the second or third most popular penile piercings, I would say, after PAs.
Okay.
And I think that's because over here, like, people are intact, so it's something that they can get. It's not known to have a long healing time. It's not known to be especially painful. And of course, like, people without foreskins can also get them, but it does look different. It's not kind of quite the same piercing in a lot of ways, because you're piercing through an area where there's potentially more scar tissue and that sort of thing.
I mean, it's almost entirely scar
Yeah.
tissue, but it's not scar tissue in the way where you might think of like scarification scar tissue or a rejection scar from a piercing, because quite often circumcisions are done in infancy and they have decades to heal by the time that we're evaluating and performing a piercing. So it is pretty ideal when a client has that visible band, that like frenum band of tissue. So I would imagine, in a lot of ways, maybe it would be easier to perform that piercing on someone with intact anatomy, because visually you would have a lot more indicators for ideal placement. With circumcised anatomy, it is scar tissue, but it's very well established scar tissue, but you're essentially going through the remnant of what was a frenulum band at one point. Sometimes they can be a little bit more pronounced than others. The video example that I have, it's a very pronounced frenum, so it's really somebody who's ideally suited for it even after a circumcision. But sometimes the anatomy can be a little bit ambiguous as to ideal placement because of the scarring from a circumcision.
And they do look very different as well. So for example, on a circumcised individual, they could be wearing, you know, a 1/4 inch or 5/16 of jewellery at capacity, depending on their anatomy. Whereas somebody that hasn't been circumcised, you're talking about skin that's like wafer thin. You know, it's like a millimetre thin. So you might start them out initially with a bar, but the bar is going to slide from one side to the other quite dramatically. Because of that movement, it doesn't tend to move that much kind of throughout the day, because if you have a foreskin, it's going to kind of hold everything in place. But during sexual activity and other things, there can be quite a lot of movement. So it's more common to switch over to a ring at some point, because the skin will stretch naturally over time. So you might end up wearing a clicker in it, or a captive bead ring. And yeah, so I would say it's interesting how they are like very different piercings, kind of done on the same part of the body, depending on whether you've been circumcised or not.
Yeah, so it's an interesting one. You know, I've done a fair amount of them over the years, but almost entirely on circumcised clientele. So I got a video for you if you're on the Archmage tier of my Patreon, patreon.com/RyanPBA. You can check that out shortly. But another thing that I wanted to mention to people, and it's a relatively short window for you to be aware of it and to sign up on it and to make sure you don't miss out on it, is we're going to be doing a no additional cost class on Sunday, July 27th, 2025. We're going to be doing a two-part class. So my part of it will be talking a little bit about the first stages of instrument reprocessing. So again, I'm a reprocessing studio. We did the safe practices in the piercing room class, and in that I talk about the use of enzymatic products, safe transport of contaminated tools into a processing area to continue on the steps to re-sterilize that item. So I'm going to be talking about that just a little bit. I'm going to be talking about some safe use of disinfectants, some different things there. So it's going to be some really handy information. And then you're also going to do a presentation about jewelry sizing. That's something that you've done before. I've seen you teach that class, and it's really intelligent, really smart, and really useful. So do you want to give us a little sneak peek about what you're going to be talking about?
So I'm going to be doing Size Matters, which I've done, I think, twice over the past couple of years. And it's been redeveloped each time. And it's basically about size theory in the jewelry that we select for initial piercings. And the thought that goes into that, why some piercings are 18 gauge or 16 gauge or 14 or 12, and how we determine what's going to be most appropriate beyond, well, this is what I was taught, so this is what I do. So it's kind of exploring a little bit of the theory behind that, and what works well, what doesn't work well, and I hope it'll give people a little bit more of a better understanding of why they're making some of the decisions that they're making, or give them a better basis for making those decisions if they don't have a lot of confidence when it comes to jewelry sizing.
Yeah, I think it can be really helpful for people. If you are, again, an active subscriber on the Archmage tier, that's the $15 tier, the one that includes all that video content, then you'll also have access to this class. So to attend the class, you just go to my Patreon page. There'll be a sign-up form for your invitation link. So you can go ahead and sign up to there. The invite window will be open right up until the morning of Sunday, July 27th. You do have to be an active supporter on that, but it's $15. There's no obligation to it. So if you're an existing subscriber, you already will have access to that sign-up sheet for the invite code. Or if you do want to sign up, it's very inexpensive, and again, there's no obligation. Initially, I had this as kind of like a save the date kind of a thing, because I had every intention on doing a paid webinar that day. But going to the APP conference, seeing that there was a little bit of a downturn, fewer people attending, noticeably fewer people spending money on the expo floor, things like that, you can tell that things are just a little bit tight for people right now. So I didn't want to try to cash in and try to shake too much money out of people. So we wanted to make it a little bit more accessible. So it will just be available for Patreon subscribers there. And I just thought that would be a nice little extra thing to do for people to help support the community in a slightly more accessible way. So hope you can attend on Sunday, July 27th. This will be a live-only webinar, so you can go ahead and sign up for the invite link at patreon.com/RyanPBA.
Yeah, so like you're saying about conference having a little bit of a different energy this year, I felt like everybody that I talked to about it, the main difference was on the expo floor, there wasn't that stampede, and I felt that the spending was a little bit more measured and a bit more doled out over the entire week. Whereas in other years that I've been, everyone's kind of spending their money on that first day, and then the rest of the week it's a bit more quiet. I felt this week people were a bit more reserved and measured in their spending. And I think that's definitely a sign of the times a little bit, people are having to think a bit more about their purchases. Obviously with gold pricing continuing to trend upwards, I think that
$3,500 an ounce, something like that.
I think that more people are being a bit more discerning with their shopping and diversifying in what it is they're selling. And for the first time in what feels like forever, I'm seeing a lot more new versions of titanium designs. So it's kind of nice, I think, to see companies, especially bigger companies, shift their gaze more towards titanium again. I think that they recognize that that's where things are going, and trying to get ahead of that curve. But it also puts me in mind of something that came up during one of the classes that I instructed at conference this year, which was about basically improving the standard of jewellery that you're selling, transitioning away from externally threaded jewellery. One of the topics that came up was that I do feel that it's kind of rude to just have a plain ball for people as the titanium option. Does that make sense?
It does. For me in my studio, it doesn't really feel that way. It doesn't feel like it's, oh, here's everything in the world and then here's the cheap person option. Because I started with the cheap person option because I was the cheap person.
Yep.
It started with the plain ball, and then it was the gem ball, and then it was all the other titanium options that came in, and then that gave me the opportunity to expand into gold. I think over the last few years, the industry has been really kind of unbalanced, shifted over to that gold side. It has been incredible for growth for studios and for companies and for organizations. But now that I think we're seeing it come back maybe a little bit more to center, where people are kind of split between maybe their gold market and their titanium market, you don't want to forget that some clients, they might still want to come into your studio, get that safe piercing, support your business, but they might just genuinely not be able to afford some of those gold tickets. So having a wide variety of titanium options right now and for the next year or however long in our near future is fantastic. So it's great to see that companies aren't ignoring that market, and companies are saying, hey, we're going to have all these new and interesting things, all these different options in titanium to make things that are maybe a little bit of a more affordable entry point, or something for your return clients to come back, and different things to support your new clients coming in, your existing clients coming in, without having to spend every dollar they have to get the piercing they want. So it's great to see all that verified titanium out there, and it's important to make sure that you keep things accessible. Otherwise, you're going to start squeezing clients out of your door. If you're only catering to that gold market, realize that some clients might be in a similar scenario to a lot of us as body piercers and as human beings and as people. Economically, that might not be able to afford that gold, but titanium is achievable for them. So don't forget about that titanium market.
So the reason that I feel that it's rude to just have a ball is because I think some people think, oh, by just having a titanium ball, I'm doing enough. I'm showing that, I'm accommodating that type of client and that type of customer. And that mentality always puts me in mind of the one vegan dish at a restaurant. But like it's shit.
Potato.
Yeah, it's just something like I don't know because I'm not actually vegan, so I don't know what the current thing is, but I was vegetarian for years, and I remember going to restaurants and they would always serve exactly the same thing. Every restaurant you would go to, it was something involving an avocado. Like, it was just the same meal over and over again everywhere, and you would just think they don't give a bollocks. Like, they don't care about this market. So when you go to a restaurant and there's 20, 30 options, and then there's the one vegan thing, it does send a message that, like, of course you're welcome here with the large party that you're dining with, but as an individual diner, you would never come here, and we don't really want you here, and, it is what it is. So I think that it's good to keep in mind that if you're trying to get someone to engage with your business, to not just look at it as you're doing them a favor by having a plain titanium ball for them, when there's a plethora of different designs that you could source really easily, that would help them step up to achieving their goals as PRCs. And like 10 years ago, I think, I got my anodizer, and I still use it like every single day. Every single day I use my anodizer, because people buy titanium pieces anodized yellow to match other gold pieces that they want to get. So for me, that's a massive selling point in my studio. If somebody wants to buy a piece of gold, maybe their first ever piece, and they're like, oh, I would, but my other ones are in plain titanium and it's not going to match. And I'm like, well, we can actually fix you up with some like domes or discs or stars or spikes or little gems in titanium, and we can anodize them yellow, and it will match this yellow gold piece reasonably well. We have examples of that in the cabinet. And then I actually get the sale, because it's removed that barrier and it's produced an affordable option where they can now start their collection. So I just think it's a market that's it's not just a market that should be tolerated. It should be embraced and appreciated as like the core that's going to keep you going, especially during difficult times in the economy, because there's always clients that want to get pierced.
Yeah, it's a sticky situation right now because I would include myself in the category of studios where I am reliant on the sales that I've had over the last few years, and I can feel a market retraction, not completely like running away from gold, but I can feel a little bit more apprehension to those larger ticket pieces of gold. I know that there'll be rises and falls, peaks and valleys for any business, for any economy. And I know that this isn't the end of gold. We're still selling gold every day in my studio. But we are getting a bit more interest in the slightly more affordable price point items, the titanium items, things like that. So it's definitely not something that I want to ignore in my shop. I want to make sure that my options stay stocked and that people know that, if they have this budget or that budget, that they can still get a safe piercing in my shop. And I think that's the really important thing for us to focus on right now.
Yeah, and I think it's also important right now for studios that maybe haven't been through periods like this before to keep in mind that it's a great time to just be focusing on sustainable growth.
Yeah, like market expansion and all these different things, those are all fantastic when you're in the right moment. But I don't know that this is the right moment. For me, I'm really just focusing on making sure that there's a good balance for my staff for their personal time, their business time. I want to make sure that bills are getting paid and that people still have the opportunity to take time off. I think that sometimes business owners might tend to lean on their staff a little bit too hard if they can feel that maybe clients have a slightly lower per transaction spend, that they might want to lean on their staff to say, like, we need to bring in more, we need to bring in more. But what I would rather focus on is like, well, what's enough for a studio? I don't always need more. I just need to have a happy balance. I want to make sure that staff still wants to come into work and still wants to enjoy their time at work and not feel like it's a grind. So I think it can be a little bit easier when you have options right in front of somebody that they might be a little bit easier to say yes to.
So we have been known in the past to touch the hot stove. It's hard sometimes to resist the temptation. And there was an issue that has been at the forefront of a lot of piercers' minds and a lot of jewellery makers' minds lately, and that is Phase 2 XRF Boogaloo.
The Body Jewelry Verification Program.
The Phase 2 Body Jewellery Verification Program. And the absolute last thing we want to do is upset anybody, stoke anyone's stress, anything like that. But what we did want to do is maybe just take a moment, since we do have colleagues and people on here that listen to the podcast, just take a moment to clarify some of the things that we've learned from a position that's kind of as neutral as it can be. I don't think anybody can ever truly be neutral on any subject, but we are not part of the program. We are not, board members, committee members for the APP. We're not jewellery makers. We're just piercers, APP members, buyers and sellers, and that's it. That's our position. And that's also the majority of the industry. So we thought we could maybe fill in some blanks for other people who are in the same position as us, buying and selling jewellery, just wondering how all of this really affects them day to day.
Yeah, and I mean, personally, in my studio, in my business, I don't really feel that it affects me greatly. When the Body Jewelry Verification Program launched Phase 1, and it was about titanium and steel, niobium, I think, also was included in that. It was pretty simple. It was just verifying mill certificates from companies. It was pretty easy. I did feel that it was nice as someone who, I would consider myself a lay person when it comes to material. Like, I do understand things like, ASTM grades and what you want to look for. I do understand that you want to ask people for mill certificates, but beyond that, I do really rely on people who know how to verify a mill certificate, things like that. So having the Phase 1 program, I did find to be pretty helpful for me as a piercer and as a business owner, as a jewelry buyer. For Phase 2, it really honestly hasn't phased me very much because I'm carrying brands in my studio that have the Phase 2 sticker, that don't have the Phase 2 sticker. There are lots of reputable manufacturers from lots of different scales out there, and I buy from reputable companies. So the Phase 2 sticker hasn't really been the main factor for me making those decisions just yet. So to see all these conversations springing up around me, it's been quite a lot of information to try to keep up with. And you're a bit more of a nerd than I am, so you've been reading a lot of the information out there, diving deep down the hole about like what this terminology means and how it might impact us and how it might impact other people in the industry. So what do you want to talk about a little bit?
So I kind of just want to take a moment to just give some clarifying information. Again, the information is not from the APP. This is just information that I've gathered from reading over all the material that I've been able to get a hold of, to hopefully potentially put some people's minds at ease. I know that there are a lot of people who are really upset about this, and I can understand why. Phase 1 to verify titanium is a little bit different from Phase 2 in that as APP members we are required to use titanium that's been verified to meet APP minimum standards in order to use it for initial piercing. Phase 2, however, is an opt-in program for gold and platinum. So being an opt-in program, we're not looking at minimum standards. We're looking more towards like maximum standards, if you like. So I think that there is that difference, and it's not super clear in the branding for members of the public and for consumers. And in order to take part in Phase 2, one of the requirements is that you perform in-house testing with an XRF machine, an X-ray machine. What that machine does is it provides a breakdown of the materials on the surface of the jewellery that comes into contact with the body. Now, these machines are very expensive, ranging between $5,000 and $50,000. There's a huge range of quality, but even at the absolute lower end, it's a huge amount of money, and it can be cost prohibitive for a lot of smaller independent makers who, from what I gather, are upset about this financial burden and upset that there's been a direct or indirect implication that if you're not in this program, that your jewellery is unsafe. So I completely understand that anger, and I don't want to do anything to question or diminish that. But what I can do is share some information that we as members and just as body piercers can hopefully use to help with this problem in terms of the role that we play interacting with the public with the issue.
So when my mind is on standards, it's about standards as a body piercer. But you've been reading all the conversations that have been happening. You've been reading the body jewelry verification program material, and you've been going down a hole, and you've been kind of getting a deeper understanding about this information. So what are the updates you can give somebody like me, like the person who's buying and selling the jewelry?
So first off, it is a voluntary program. It's an opt-in program. It's not a requirement for APP membership. So that means that for us as APP members, we can still buy and use jewellery that's not Phase 2 verified, as long as the jewellery meets APP minimum standards for gold and platinum. And I think that there is a little bit of confusion around that subject. So we are still fine to use jewellery from some of our favourite vendors who are not Phase 2 verified. This affects initial piercing jewellery only as well, in terms of even just meeting the minimum standard. Same as titanium, portion of the jewellery that touches the piercing wound itself, if you like. So we don't have to suddenly stop selling or promoting from our favourite makers who are not Phase 2 verified. That's the number one thing. And we should continue to support the makers that we love, that are putting out the work that we get to share with our clients. I think that that's really important for us to keep in mind, because we are the public face of the industry to our customers more so than anybody else. So we're actually in a position where we get to educate the public more than anyone else in this discussion. So that's important to keep in mind. If you're a piercer who's an APP member and you make your own jewellery in-house, If you're making jewelry out of gold and platinum for initial piercings, again, you can still do that as long as you meet the minimum standards, which have not changed. They're the same as they've been for years. And you can also still apply for corporate sponsorship with the APP if you wish to. That means that you can be listed on their website, on their map. You can use the APP logo along with your products. And to qualify for that, you might need some supplier testing and third-party verification, but you don't require an XRF machine. That is $200 a year, or it can be done for free if that's too cost prohibitive as well. So if you are interested in exploring that avenue, those are options that are available to you. If you're not, you're not, and that's fine, because we can still support you even if you don't decide to opt into phase 2 in its current form. And I say current form because it is still changing, it's still developing, and I think that potential new avenues for inclusion are still being explored. So that's kind of one of the reasons that we wanted to come on and just share a little bit of this information with clarity, because there is so much noise out there about the subject.
Yeah, it's a little bit confusing for me, because the Body Jewelry Verification Program, that's an APP program, the Association of Professional Piercers, and I'm a member. So, I consider myself, in a way, an ambassador to the APP and their standards. When clients come into my studio, or when I talk to other piercers at a conference out there, or if I get a contact online, I want to be able to talk about some of these issues. Why is this standard important? Why is that standard important? About everything, sterilization and jewelry and all the other things in our studios. So if we're the forward-facing, as you said, I think that's a really good term. If we're the forward-facing category of people,
God help us all.
Our beautiful faces are forward to the public. We're playing a really crucial role in sharing this information with them. So I think it helps us as body piercers. I think it helps clients as piercees to better understand this information. I know that there are a lot of conversations that are happening online right now, and I think it's important that we pay attention to these discussions.
Yeah, and I'm very honest with my clients. I like to think that we're all honest with our clients, but I am very straight with my clients. And if somebody came in and they said, I'm looking at picking up a piece of gold, can you tell me, is this phase 2 verified? I would be happy to say, no, this isn't phase 2 verified. This is an opt-in program, and some of the sellers that we use aren't participating in this program, but still meet the standard for safe use for initial piercings. And I would be happy to explain why that is. I'd be happy to explain that the program might be cost prohibitive for small independent makers who we still want to support and whose pieces we still want to bring to market. I don't have any problem doing that. And I feel that as the people who are directly facing the public, up until recently, and for some people listening to this podcast up until right now, we've possibly known the least about what's going on. So it kind of puts it into context that we're the ones who are going to be actually giving out most of this information to the public. So it's quite important that we know the difference between what is required, what's not required, what's a minimum standard, what's an opt-in program. So hopefully that provides a little bit of clarification, and hopefully some peace of mind for APP members who are making their own jewellery in their own studios to work with. If up until this point you've been making jewellery for initial use that meets the APP minimum standard for gold and platinum, you can keep on doing that. Nothing has to change. And if it's not for initial use, it's not required to meet any standard really, other than the relevant consumer safety standards for your location.
So, if as piercers, the best that we can do is stay engaged in the conversations and listen, and then do our best to share that information. What can jewelers be doing? Because I know that jewelers are the ones that are really going to be carrying this conversation forward. So what can they do to maybe better communicate with an organization, better communicate with body piercers, and share the information that they want out there representing the jewelry they make?
I want to acknowledge that this is a situation that has been dumped in their laps to a point. There wasn't something that was requested, at least certainly not en masse, by the jewellery making community. So I don't want to be as bold or arrogant as to presume to suggest what they should be doing or shouldn't be doing as someone who doesn't make jewellery. But as someone who buys jewellery, some of the things that I look for that have nothing to do with the APP and any standards, minimum or opt-in or whatever, something that I look for is clarification in terms of, is the gold cadmium free? Is it lead free? Is this gold recycled? Is this gold ethically sourced? You know, like these are bits of information that are really helpful to put out there without necessarily being asked for them. Like if you're somebody who makes their living making or fabricating gold pieces and selling them, if you're just putting, this is 14 karat gold, the end, you're missing an opportunity to talk up your product and to potentially make your product a little bit more trustworthy in the marketplace. And when I say trustworthy, I don't mean to imply that the jewellery shouldn't be trusted, but as gold prices continue to trend upward, I think that we are probably going to see more instances of jewellery or jewellery sampling from the marketplace that maybe doesn't meet the consumer standards that it's supposed to. I think when the cost of goods go up, the quality can vary a lot and there can be inconsistencies in that quality, and just stating clearly that you aren't part of that problem, that you're 100% confident that your jewellery is cadmium free and lead free and that you're happy to say that, that does mean something, because it means you're also part of that chain of responsibility and that you're prepared to make those statements about the products that you're selling. So I think that listing the positive attributes of the jewellery and your material sourcing and your methods as far as you're comfortable, I think it's a really good time to be doing that right now. You know, that would just be from my perspective as someone who buys jewellery and who buys it from both phase 2 verified and non-phase 2 verified suppliers, and will continue to do both. You've been buying jewellery a lot longer than me. What are some of the things that you look for when you're looking for professional relationships, kind of business to business?
I mean, any answer that I would give is going to revolve around the core of reputation. So reputation can come from a lot of different things. It can come from word of mouth. It can be, hey, I know all these other studios that are using these brands. They're getting great results. It's great to work with. There are so many gold makers out there now where I'm kind of in a freeze. When I go to an expo, when I go to a conference and there are 10 new company names that I don't recognize yet, I'm going to be a little bit apprehensive to spend my money there because I don't know their reputation yet. Their jewelry might look beautiful, but I don't know, how the handling goes. Their pin quality, their ring quality, seam quality, their gem settings, their castings, the detail, the polish, all these different things will loosely revolve around reputation. So when brands put out that information where they say things, it's ethically sourced in this way, or it's this alloy, 14 karat, 18 karat, whatever it might be, or gems are conflict free, all these different things, it tells me something about that company, tells me something about that company's values, and it helps to build the reputation there. So it's just that I want companies to be open and transparent, and to talk to us as body piercers, to talk to us as colleagues, and to give us information about what makes their jewelry special, and why we should want to put our trust in them to become a partner in a way, and to sell their brands to our clients, because the same way, our reputation is so important. So if we're selling jewelry that we can't believe in and that we can't talk about, if I can't talk about the jewelry and say, like, this is who makes it and this is how it's made and this is why I believe in it and want to sell it in my studio, it becomes more challenging for me to move that on to a client, to pierce somebody with it and to have them believe in the reputation of my studio. So that's what's really most important to me. It's less about having that yellow sticker, and it's more about who's the company, what's their reputation, and what are they doing to make this stuff.
Reliability and just being able to have a positive business relationship with a company is so important to me right now. I think that when you are working with a budget, and we all work with a budget, whether it's a bigger budget or smaller budget is really the only thing that changes. I don't know anybody right now who just has a blank checkbook for jewellery. I think that more than just shopping with, your eyes and falling in love with pieces where maybe you would have done in the past, more of us are thinking, is this a business that I can have like a good, healthy, long-term relationship with? Like, for example, I don't particularly want to trade with businesses who are reluctant or unwilling to offer repairs for the work that they do, just in the sense that, there is a chain of responsibility. I think everybody deserves to be paid for the work that they do as well. And I'm definitely happy to pay for repair work where there's been an error on the client's part, 100%. But I think that if you're going to take a piece of jewelry that's the size of like a size 10 shoe and put it on a wee pin, the chance of it accidentally breaking at some point is fairly substantial. So, I tend not to purchase pieces that I don't have a lot of structural stability belief in. But I do think that that's an important element, just focusing on having a business-to-business relationship that I can trust, that's going to keep me going back, buying again and again and again.
Yeah, there have been a lot of things that I've had to learn about material and the craft of making jewelry. I remember when it was like, okay, well, steel jewelry is great, and then learning about all the different kinds of steel jewelry and how there's some steel jewelry that's probably below an acceptable minimum standard, and then learning the same thing about titanium, and then learning the same thing about precious metals, understanding the difference between white gold that's whitened with palladium versus white gold that's whitened with nickel, and understanding what cadmium is and how it can be a risk because it's a toxic heavy metal, and understanding that you don't want cadmium in your alloy, and ideally not even in your solders, things like that. And understanding and learning more about that, so when brands can help educate us as body piercers, it really helps to create that additional level of trust and additional layer of confidence. I've learned a lot about body jewelry from the jewelers that I'm buying product from, and sitting in on their classes and talking to them across their table at an expo. Like, I learned so much from jewelers, and I want them to be involved in these conversations, to continue sharing information. Hopefully they're also open to listening and hearing some of the input from piercers, from organizations, and having kind of a community discussion involving all this stuff. And I certainly want to be involved in that so I can learn more as a body piercer and sell better jewelry and have heightened levels of relationships with all these companies and my clients.
Make sure we're giving clients the right information too.
Yeah, like clients are so well educated these days that if a client comes in, okay, clients used to come in and ask me questions 10 years ago, 15 years ago about brands that I was selling, and I would be like, I don't know. And I would feel really foolish, and now clients are coming in and they're asking such smart and such deep questions about jewelry, where I have this immense pride when I can fully answer those questions, when I watch you answer those questions, when I watch my staff in my studio answer those questions. I have a lot of pride there because of, hey, look at the progress we've made as an industry and as professionals, where we can answer these deep questions about the entire chain of something that was dug up out of the ground and then was refined into this beautiful body jewelry that we can pierce people with. I love that information, and I just want to keep learning more and more.
Yeah, and I hope that people can take that information and implement it in their sales practices in a positive ways, to make sure that our small jewellery makers and fabricators aren't losing out on work due to a misunderstanding of this program. And I also hope that the small jewellery makers and fabricators, and really jewelers of any size of business, can hear that information and know that we don't necessarily need them to make a 90-minute long PowerPoint presentation about how their jewellery is made, but having anything other than just it's 14 karat is going to improve the sellability for them selling to us, for us selling to members of the public. So, like, long story short, if you have something good to say about your product, now's the time to say it.
Yeah. Like, it would say a lot to me if someone was like, 14 karat or 18 karat gold, and it's refined in this certain way rather than being, mystery recycled gold and all these different things. Like, I don't know enough about this stuff to consider myself an expert. I might consider myself like a general expert on body piercing, but it's going to be primarily from the practitioner and not from the crafter. So if I can learn more information about how my jewelry is crafted, I think that's just going to make me a stronger body piercer and a more informed buyer of body jewelry. So, if you want to learn a little bit more about the safe and effective use of body jewelry, definitely sign up for that class that we'll be doing on Sunday, July 27th, 2025. Lola's Size Matters class really helped me look at things in a lot of different ways. It's not so much about, hey, use this gauge for this piercing, but with that deep dive of like, maybe it's a better idea to put this end piece on a 14 gauge post versus an 18 gauge post, and what's the benefit? Hey, should you have that tiny little disc versus a larger disc, and all these different factors that really change the way that I think about piercings, and it's had a really positive impact on the piercings that I'm performing in my studio, and I've seen other people get that same benefit too. So you can come to that class if you're a subscriber at patreon.com/RyanPBA on the Archmage tier. When you're signed up to that tier, you also get access to 50 plus narrated videos that I've made over the last 5 years showing all different kinds of piercing information. So you can sign up for one of those invite links right now, basically. So I want to say thanks for listening to us talk about a kind of a dry subject, but I thought it was really interesting. Anything else that you want to talk about?
Just, join us next time on Ryan and Lola Get Cancelled.
Please don't hate us. We're still buying loads of jewelry. But yeah, it's a tough time to thrive and stay alive. Economically, I think people feel a lot of pressure, and that pressure can manifest itself in a lot of different ways. So I think now is a time where we should all be listening to each other and supporting each other as best we can and moving forward as a community. So thanks again for listening to the Piercing Wizard podcast, and we'll be back with another episode soon.
Bye.
For more information about the show, visit piercingwizardpodcast.com or like Piercing Wizard Podcast on Facebook. For more info about your host, visit precisionbodyarts.com or search Ryan PBA on Facebook, Instagram, and Tumblr. If you enjoy the show, you can subscribe on iTunes, Apple Podcast, and Google Play. Music by Benny B. Blanco. Show copyright 2017, Precision Body Arts LLC, all rights reserved.